Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be telling you every single book that I read in the month of February. February overall was a great reading month for me. I read 16 books and for the first time ever, I finished my entire TBR in the month of February. I cannot remember the last time that I actually fully finished my TBR, as in the list that I made at the beginning of the month. I finished every single thing on that list, plus a couple of other things that I added as well as the month went along, and it feels really good to have finished a TBR. Honestly, a few of them had been on my TBR, like rolled over from months past, and a couple of them just really wanted to get off my TBR, and honestly, I'm really happy with all of the books that I read this month. There was only a couple that fell below my expectations, but I had quite a lot that were very close to a 5 stars. I'm quite excited to sit down and do this wrap up with you all today. Also, before we start, I want to show you my cute t-shirt that says reading over reality. This is a gift from my sister, which is adorable, and I will link the maker of these t-shirts, their Instagram, in the bio below as well if you want to check them out, because it's so cute. And I have another t-shirt from them and a jumper as well. But let's kick off. I think I'm going to just do this in chronological order because it'll make the most sense, because I was doing a few different reading vlogs and different things throughout the month, and I like to kind of track like where my mood was, throughout the month. But this was quite a short month, obviously, February, so I'm really happy that I managed to still read 16 books. So let's start off. The first book that I read this month was Nocturnes by Kazuo Ishiguro. As some of you may know, I am currently reading every single book by this author, and I have 2 books left after I finish this one. So I'm really excited to be like really making progress with this goal of reading their entire backlist. This one is actually short stories, and they're all on the theme of kind of music and love and the passing of time. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about this because I am kind of up and down with short stories, really, but something about this I really did enjoy. I gave it like a 3.5 stars, maybe like rounding it up to 4. It wasn't my favourite from this author by any means, but it wasn't like as difficult as some of his other books have been as well. Obviously with short stories there's always some that you prefer more than others, some that you want it to be like a full story, and some that have just like kind of already faded from my memory because I read this at the beginning of the month. But definitely a good solid read that I really enjoyed. So if you love music, you probably like this even more than I did. I'm not like that into music, which I know sounds like a horrible thing to say, but it's true. I'm a bookish girl. I'm not as into music. But if you are, then maybe this one would be good for you. And as always, I just love Kazuo Ishiguro's writing. Just something about it is very nice and very calming to me. So that one was the first book that I read this month. Next, I read a little novella because I'm carrying on with my Stormlight Archive reread, and I finally got up to reading Edge Dancer, which is a short novella between the second and the third book, I believe. This is a 5 star from me. I can't really tell you about this book because it's following one specific character that you only meet in the second book, I believe, and my favourite character, like one of my absolute favourite characters. Absolutely love this character, and it just is another joy to read. An easy 5 star. Took me not long at all. It's like not very long. And I just absolutely love following this character. And I have not carried on actually with the rest of my Stormlight Archive reread because I've been really focusing on literary fiction actually for a lot of this month, which leads me on to the next book, which was actually our book club book. So if you don't know, I host a Reading Around the World book club on Fable, and every single month we choose a different book from a different country to read, and this month we chose Austria, and the book that we chose was Chess, and this one was a 5 star read for me, which was so nice because sometimes with the book club books you can't always guarantee that you're going to love the books. Even though I do quite a lot of research and I try and pick a book that lots of people will enjoy, you never know what's going to happen. But with this one, lots of people had recommended it and I really enjoyed it. It's a really skinny little book, and basically it's all about this ship that is on its way to Buenos Aires, and you are following kind of an unnamed passenger, and he realizes that on this ship there is a chess master, like a grandmaster, and he refuses to play any of the other passengers without a lot of money up front. And so a lot of them get together and they try and challenge this grandmaster. And then there is a mysterious other passenger on this ship, says he's never played a game of chess in his life, but seems to be really good at the game, and it's kind of unfolds from there. But it's a very short story. It's really going to stay with me. I would actually love to reread this. And also someone in the book club said that they did some research around this author and like his background, and it really helped make them enjoy this book even more. So I really want to do that as well, because I do think that this is is one of those books that's kind of like the tip of the iceberg, and there's so much to talk about within this. Really, really fun reading this in the book club. Lots of people enjoyed it. I think most people at least rated it a 4. Lots of people also rated it a 5-star for me, and I can definitely recommend. A great book for Austria as well if you are doing the Reading Around the World challenge, and as always, the book club is linked in the description below. We are currently gearing up to do our next country and our next book, but I will leave the link below and you can decide to join and check out which book that we're doing. We have already decided, so click that link and see which country and which book we're doing for the month of March. Next up, I carried on reading a manga that I've been reading and really enjoying, which is Spy Family. This has just been such a fun little pace breaker. I just get these from my library, so I don't have physical copies of it. They're really cute, they're really funny, they're heartwarming. It is basically about this family. One of them is a spy, one of them is an assassin. And for various reasons, they decide that life would be a lot easier if they could form a fake family together, and they adopt a child. Also, little do they know that the child actually has telepathy and can understand everything that they're trying to hide, but she's also trying to hide the fact that she has telepathy. It's really cute, it's very silly, but it's actually very heartwarming, and I'm very excited to carry on. This was the 3rd one that I read, and I will definitely be carrying on with this series. And I also started watching the anime on Netflix as well, and it is just as the same. It's like the same tone to it. It's really fun, so we'll be carrying on watching that as well. Next up, I read another book that I've been having on my TBR for a while, and it is, I think, just come out, and that is Green Teeth. This book came out on the 25th of February, and I was lucky enough to be sent an advanced copy of it. This one, I think, was fun, but just didn't 100% work for me. It's an adult book, but something about the writing felt slightly more on the young adult side. This is all about a monster who lives in a lake, and then one day the nearby village throws a woman into the lake and she decides to save her instead of eat her. And you're kind of following this growing friendship between this woman who is a witch and the lake monster who's called Green Teeth. I liked the initial setup, and then a lot of the plot felt quite formulaic. It's kind of set up in a way of like a bit of like a fetch and carry kind of quest, like a 3 trials type thing, but it felt quite predictable in the way that it was being laid out, and then the relationship dynamics felt a little bit young adult to me rather than adult. But to be honest, what pulled this up to a 3-star for me actually was the very ending, which I don't usually think that. I usually think that if there is weaknesses in the middle, then I'm not going to really love the ending, but I actually really liked how surprising the ending was, and it was kind of like a fun, surprising twist that called back to a lot of stuff about the plot in a way that I didn't guess, and so that pushed it back up to me. This is a 3-star read from me. I think that for some people they would absolutely love this, so don't take my 3-star review as like don't bother trying this. It just wasn't like 100% for me, but yeah, a very fun book still. So that is Green Teeth. Next up, I'm continuing on my quest to become a poetry girl, and I read a book of poetry called Absence by Ali Lewis. This is a poetry collection that says it's all about the space between things. It's about nothing, it's about vacuums, it's about gaps and losses, and I did get the sense that a lot of these were talking about kind of the end of a relationship or grief and that kind of loss, but a lot of it actually I didn't kind of get the rest of the absence vibe from it. Maybe I'm just like not reading it very well, but like I'm just not very like well versed in poetry. I did really like some of these poems, but as usual, like you can't like every single poem, and I think that as I read more poetry I will enjoy more and more that I do read of it, but like so far just a couple of them kind of stood out to me as really, really lovely. But the best way to give you a taste to see if you'd like this poetry collection is to show you a poem. So I'll just put one on screen now and you can read and see what you think of it. This is my favourite one, or one of my favourite ones from the collection, so you can get a taste. But yeah, overall I don't know how to rate poetry yet, but this was good, so I liked it. Next up, I did a very fun video where I read only Abby Jimenez romances for the whole week in the lead up to Valentine's Day. This was such a fun vlog to film. I had a great time, and something about just immersing yourself in the world of romance and just having a lot of fun with that was really enjoyable. It was like definitely a good pace breaker. I don't read that much romance consistently, so when I find good romance it makes me so happy. So in very quick succession I read all 3 of Abby Jimenez's books in her Part of Your World series that starts with Part of Your World and then goes to Yours Truly, and then the most recent one is Just for the Summer. I really enjoyed all three of these books. I think that for romance, Abby Jimenez is an excellent writer. There's enough emotional depth in the stories. It's not just about the romance. There is a good amount of chemistry. It doesn't focus too much on the sexual side of the relationships. There is enough going on with each of the characters' lives. I do think slightly, a lot of the characters kind of slightly blended into one, especially the female heroines in this. They felt a little bit samey to me. I didn't get a really strong sense of their character. And I do think the emotional stakes could have been introduced slightly earlier in some of these books. But overall, really, really, truly enjoyed these books. Especially my favourite one is the middle one, which is Yours Truly, which is Bree and Jacob's story. I really enjoyed this one the most. I liked how they came together. I liked that it was like slightly more of a realistic plot. I don't know actually if it even was realistic, because it does have fake dating in this one, which obviously seems very unrealistic for like normal life. No one normally goes around having a fake dating scenario, but something about it felt quite real to me, and I just really enjoyed their relationship, and like they would go the distance, I think, out of anyone. But all three of them were really, really fun, and I really enjoyed them. If you've not read Abby Jimenez before, I would say that they are the most similar in tone to Emily Henry, and I have ups and downs with Emily Henry, but in general do really enjoy Emily Henry's writing. So if you like Emily Henry, definitely give these a try. But my full thoughts for all three of these books are in the vlog, so I will link it somewhere around the screen at some point while I'm talking about these, because you need to go and watch that vlog to see what I thought in detail and my reactions as I was reading. But overall, such a fun kind of challenge to do, to read just romances for a full week, and I will definitely be doing that again for Valentine's next year, or maybe just another time, because it was great fun. So after that lovely week of reading full romances for a week, I had the most disappointing book of this whole month, and unfortunately I'd had this on my TBR for ages and it took me months to read, and that is Foundry Side. This was actually on my 24 in 2024 priority list for last year. I started reading it literally, I think, in December, and just kept putting it down, kept not wanting to pick it up, and I thought it was just the mood that I was in. And now, having finished this book, it really wasn't for me, and there's so many things that I didn't like about this book that it's kind of like difficult to talk about. Like, a lot of the concept was really fun and the writing wasn't that bad. I did give this 2 stars overall, but so much of it just really felt short for me. Like, it was so heavily over explained, a lot of the world building and a lot of the technical magic system, because in this world, basically, people can kind of decode and like reconfigure objects in the physical world. But basically you're following this girl, and at the beginning of this book she is asked to steal this one very powerful object, and then she'll get enough money to like fix a huge problem in her life that costs a lot of money as she's living in poverty. She decides to take on this mission. Obviously it doesn't go to plan, it kind of all falls apart around her. She meets this other kind of group of people and they all work together and like trying to figure stuff out. So much of the world building just didn't make sense, which is crazy considering how much it was over explained constantly. There was huge amounts of just info dumping going on all the time, constantly just monologues explaining in depth about how this one specific thing could be happening, but then huge other things that were happening, like the religion and the politics and the economy of this world, like had huge gaps in that weren't explained in any kind of real way. It didn't make me feel like I lived in this world at all, and a lot of the like emotional connections between characters was just skipped over as well. At one point I was just like kind of gasping and rolling my eyes, because there's just like this complete shortcut to having a kind of romantic subplot. I guess it doesn't even count as that, because like nothing happened and nothing led up to anything. There was no tension, and it kind of like just was shoved in there because there was no space for anything other than info dumping, because this is a 500-page long book. It took me a long time to read, and most of it was info dumping, and you don't want info dumping at 85% of the book. You know, like when you're at 85% through the book, you need to be having resolutions for the mysteries, you need to be having emotional character development. You don't need to be having another 2 pages of info dumping about the magic system. So overall, This one really didn't work for me. This was a 2-star read. This was my most disappointing of the month. And honestly, like, I'm really upset that it was on my priority list and I was like trying to prioritize this for so long. I am definitely going to still give this author a go because I have read another one of his books last year and I really enjoyed it. And it was called The Tainted Cup. I really enjoyed The Tainted Cup, but I will not be carrying on with this series. I will just be carrying on with his other series. Next up, after that not so good book, we have a lovely book that I read that was recommended to me by my mum, which is I Captured the Castle by Dodie Smith. This one was so lovely. So this book was first published in the 40s, I believe, but honestly, the process of reading it feels like you could be reading it from any time. It's like got this really beautiful timeless quality. Something about the writing also feels very magical. It's not like a magical realism book in any way, but like something about the setting and the tone and the way it's written made me feel like it was magical in a way that like someone might be just about to do a spell, even though it's not actually magical. Like, it's not magical at all. It is very much set in the real world. This is, I would describe, kind of a young adult romance. It was very slow paced. It's not very like plot heavy. I felt like very gripped by the voice in this story because in this story you're following Cassandra, and at the beginning of the book I think she's about 16 years old and she is just starting a journal, so you're just reading her journal entries, and it's all about her life living in this decrepit castle. And her father used to be a very well-known author and has not since written anything, and her sister and her younger brother and her stepmother, they've all fallen into kind of genteel poverty. They have absolutely no money, but they live in this crumbling castle and have a father who's just not moved to write anything or help them out of the situation in any way. I just loved Cassandra's voice in this. It just felt so real, like you're actually reading from a 17-year-old, like a very smart, very like funny, kind of charismatic 17-year-old, but like all of the everything that she goes through felt so genuine, and like you just really feel it in your heart for her as well. Like, I would really recommend this to like young teens as well, but also for any age, because I mean, I read it for the first time now and I absolutely loved it. And if you have read this book, then I would love to know your opinions on the ending. I personally really loved the ending and like how realistic and like earned it felt, and I really enjoyed how it was. I think if I was younger I would have not liked the ending, so I would love to know, if you've read this one, your thoughts on the ending, and like leave a comment below with like a spoiler mark so that you're not spoiling it for anyone else who wants to read this one, because I highly recommend. This is a 4.5/5-star read from me. So that is I Capture the Castle. Next up, I read a book for my friend book club, and the pick this month was Outline by Rachel Cusk. And I was really, really excited to read this because this is my first ever Rachel Cusk book. I've never read anything by her before, and this is the start of, I think, like a 4-book series all about, well, I'm not really sure what the rest of the series is about, but this book is called Outline because it's kind of an outline of a book. It comes across as like the sketchings of different characters. There is an author in this book. She is going to Athens to teach this writing course, and on her way she like meets a character on the plane, and then she kind of like goes and meets other people, and it's basically a book just recording these conversations. It's very dialogue heavy. It also kind of reads as short stories all about these characters and their lives, like their backstories. I was really kind of nervous going in because I thought it sounds really conceptual. It sounds like one of those books that like if you get it you get it, and if you don't you don't, and I was really worried that I just wouldn't get it and it would be too conceptual for me. Actually, it's a lot more readable than I thought it was going to be, and I really enjoyed the like strange conceptual nature of it. Something about the writing does feel very accessible. It feels like maybe because they're all individual stories you can kind of get lost within them as well. So in the end I gave this 4 stars out of 5. I knocked off a star because I do feel like a lot of the voices between the different characters felt quite similar, like they sounded like the same type of person even though they're describing very different experiences. And also because of the conceptual nature of this, there wasn't like a true ending to the book, so I did feel just as a reader that there was like a bit of a lack of kind of, not like stakes, but kind of like a satisfying ending didn't like happen. It didn't all come together in a way, which I guess you can't with this type of book, but just for my own enjoyment of like when I'm picking up a novel, I do kind of want an ending. So that is like knocking it down from a 5 to a 4. But loads of amazing quotes in this and lots of ideas to really like think on, as well as a great book club book as well, because I've already had some great conversations about this book. So this one was 4 out of 5, and I think I will carry on with the rest of the series by this author as well. So if you've read that, then do let me know what you think about the series in general. Next up, I read another Discworld book. I read another Terry Pratchett, and the book that I'm up to now is Guards. I'm reading these in publication order, and I'm honestly really enjoying that. And this is what number is this? I actually don't know. Sometimes they say 8th. This is the 8th one, which is crazy actually. I'm 8 books in. I mean, this is like a 40 book series, so like it's going to take me a long to finish all the Discworld books. This one I enjoyed, and I can't say why I didn't enjoy it more, other than I think I just wasn't in the mood for it. I think this month I've been in a lot more of a literary fiction kind of headspace. I found myself really enjoying literary fiction a lot more than this is kind of fantasy, but it's also kind of like very whimsical, quite silly, quite cozy fantasy story as well. And I just, usually that's so my thing, but like just this month I was kind of just like not really in the mood for it. I was just like in the mood for literary fiction. So this one I gave like a 3.5 stars, but I'm not even really sure why. It is really fun, introduces some new characters as well, and it's got dragons in it. I don't know why I didn't love this one as much. So this one doesn't beat the Witches ones for me so far. They're still my favourite ones. I love the Witches, but it was still very much a fun read. We are moving on. I'm going through these books quite rapidly, I think, because I'm just like in the mood to chat today, and also I've got 16 books to get through, so we're just rapidly going through them. But the next book that I read was it's been on my priority list for 25 books in 2025, and it's a recommended book from my friend Alice that I finally got around to reading, and that is Biography of X by Catherine Lacey. This one is such an interesting book, and I can so see why my friend Alice was forcing me to read it, because it's genuinely like nothing else I've ever read. It is all about this woman, and her wife has just died. Her wife is X, who is this famous artist, but like artist in all senses of the word. They are an author and a painter and like a multimedia artist who does performance art. And so her wife X has just died, and she has decided to write a biography of her life because somebody else wrote a biography and it's full of errors and they didn't really know her, and so she's deciding to truly try and discover the backstory about her own wife, this woman that she's been living with for years and been married to for years. So she kind of goes on this journey, and the way that this is written is it's written as if it's a non-fiction. There is footnotes, there is pictures in it of like diary entries from X. It's written in such an interesting way because you genuinely do forget, especially at the beginning, that it's not like a real book that's got like actual research done. But also one of the most interesting things about this book, and the thing that I didn't realise going in, it's set in an alternate history of the United States and of the world. So you have like true, people who have existed in history, but a lot of the politics is different, and things that happened in the 50s in this book have like had shockwaves that have happened to the rest of the world, and also changed the entire landscape of the United States, which is where this book is set. Because it's written in such a non-fiction way, it's written as if you already, as the reader, understand the kind of the vague history of the United States. But obviously the author has to kind of also explain how history has deviated, and it was just so interesting. And that was like one of my favourite parts of this book. Well, my two favourite things about this book is firstly the main core of this book is all about, I think, privacy, and about how well can you truly know someone, and are people ever truly themselves, and like how can they affect you and your own thought of yourself, and kind of how we see people is like a reflection of how we see ourselves, and this whole thing with identity and privacy and celebrity and that whole thing, which is so interesting. But also this political side, this kind of like backstory, this kind of like in the background, it becomes more in the foreground later on in the book, about how the politics of the world has changed, and really enjoyed that bit. The only reason this isn't getting a 5-star for me is because I do think it lost quite a lot of momentum in like the latter third of the book. I felt like I was understanding the picture of X that the author was like putting forward but I wasn't quite getting enough like new information, enough like lore drops, or like enough, I don't know, to keep me going as much as the first like 2/3 of the book were. I think it would have even benefited from going back and being a bit more introspective about the author herself. There's a lot of like unexplored darkness like under the surface, and I feel like I just wanted more of it. Like, but an excellent read. Can truly recommend this one. Also, this book is very funny, but I do think I would have understood a lot of more about the jokes, and about, because like a lot of it is about the art world and like New York in general and the art scene in New York, and I think that I would have understood a lot more of the satire of that if I just knew a lot more about that. So if you have more of like knowledge about that, I think that this would hit for you even more than it did for me. But yeah, overall 4 out of 5 or 4.5 out of 5, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll talk about this with Alice and then it'll probably bump it up. So the next book that I read is the one that I was dreading reading, that I picked from my TBR jar, and I really didn't want to read it, but I did read it because I read all of my books this month from my TBR, which I'm very, very proud of myself for. And that book is The Island of Dr. Moreau, and I cannot get this sticker off for the life of me, so please ignore it. It's very, very annoying. But this book I read because it was from my TBR jar and I didn't really want to read it. I actually was enjoying it a lot more at the beginning. I thought this is like one of those classic sci-fis where you kind of know the story, or you think you know where it's going, but you don't know how it's going to come about. And I actually really enjoyed the writing style. This is like done as a journal entry, basically, about a man who finds himself shipwrecked on an island in the middle of nowhere that everybody thinks is uninhabited, but there is a disgraced doctor living there called Dr. Moreau. I really enjoyed like a lot of the build up to the like reveal about what was going on this island. I do feel like the actual reveal itself was done so quickly, and so much more could have been done about it. Like, it could have been more shocking. We skipped over a lot of like the philosophical discussion that I think it was trying to prompt. I think because it's the first of its kind, it's kind of like one of those brand new science fiction, so it's like introducing this idea, and then a lot of the discussion around the kind of like ethics and the philosophical discussions about the technology or about like these characters would happen after. But I just wanted more. I think that it just felt a bit empty to me, especially from like the midpoint onwards. And also it does have racist undertones, I have to say, and that did just like leave a very bitter taste in my mouth. That one was just fine. So the final book that I read in the month of February that I just finished yesterday is Winterkeep by Kristen Cashore. This is part of the Graceling Realm series of books that I've been reading, and honestly really enjoying every single book so far in this series for different reasons. I do still think my favourite book is the first book, but I did actually really enjoy a lot of this book. I do think they're slightly too long, and basically my issue with these books, I can't really tell you anything about this book because it's the fourth in a series, but they're set in a world in which some people are born with graces, and it means you have 2 different coloured eyes and you might have a special talent for something. And the talent can be like a talent for finding lost things, or that you're a really good gymnast, or that you're a really good cook. But basically in this book, the kind of continent that the previous books have been set on, it's like the world is expanding and it's set in a whole new place, but with some of the familiar characters. I really enjoyed the characters that we were following in this. I liked the romantic subplot that was happening. I do think I would have liked a little bit more build up, a little bit more tension, but that is always what I say with romance. But I did enjoy the way that they came together, and I felt like it was satisfying from the previous books to this one. My main issue with these stories in general is that always the villain feels really flat to me. A lot of the decisions for the villains doesn't make any sense, and you don't really get any good resolution other than they were really evil, and that just feels like a little bit flat to me. And maybe it's the young adultness of it all, but I don't think it is. I think maybe just this author focuses on building a different world, and she's very, very good at having characters go deeply emotional things and kind of like it feel actually very real and like very traumatic. They're not the type of people who will just bounce back immediately from a very traumatic event. It does feel very real, and I think that's where she puts a lot of her focus. But it does mean that like the villains and like the reasons behind things feel quite flat. And for me, I'm always liking things to have like quite logical, like I like my worlds to be quite logical and to have reasons and like things following on from one to another, and sometimes these don't have that. So this was a 4-star for me. I did actually really enjoy it, and I read it relatively quickly despite it being like 430 pages long. I actually don't think that I have the final book in this series, which is a more recent release. I think there was like a gap between the first 3 to the last 2, but the last one I think came up pretty recently, and so I will be reading it. I'm kind of interested to see where this world ends. I also just love the covers. They're very, very beautiful. So that is the last book that I read this month, and this is my stack. I read so many books physically this month that I'm very, very pleased with, and I can't believe that I read my entire TBR. Like, that makes me so happy. I never read my entire TBR. Normally after filming these videos I go straight ahead and film my TBR for the month, but I can't film my TBR for the month because the Women's Prize is going to be announced in a couple of days, on Tuesday I believe, and my TBR for the month is going to be heavily dependent on what gets longlisted for the Women's Prize. So I will be posting a live reaction to the longlist being announced, and then I will decide my TBR based on that, because I'm going to be reading a lot of literary fiction written by women in the month of March, and also probably April, and also for the rest of the few months until I've read all 16 books on the long list. So make sure you are subscribed, because I'm going to be doing vlogs for that as well and doing live reactions. It's so much fun. I love this time of year. I love the prizes. Also, the long list for the International Booker was announced. I've been trying to find out different books for that I'm going to be reading. That's very exciting. So a lot of literary fiction, a lot of translated fiction, a lot of amazing books are coming up in the next month, but I will not be posting a normal TBR video. So let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these books. Then please tell me. If I've convinced you to read any of them, also tell me that, please. And also please recommend me one book that you read in the month of February, or your favorite book that you've read so far this year. I would love to know. I'm always looking for new recommendations. But that is all from me today. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please remember to like the video and subscribe, and then go and watch all of my other videos, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye!